All right. Thrasymachus has provided his definition of justice, and now Socrates gives really close scrutiny to that definition. And what he's looking for are flaws in that definition. In particular, he's looking for internal inconsistencies, any kind of logical contradiction within that definition. Because remember, for Socrates, for Plato, the force of reason is the tool that we use to discover truth, the tool that we use to discover knowledge. And Socrates doesn't want to accept any definition of a term that is nonsensical, that's logically contradictory. In other words, if somebody claims that something both is something and is not that thing, Socrates would say, like, wait a minute, it can't be both what it is and what it isn't at the same time. The light switch can't be both on and off at the same time. It's got to be one or the other. It can't be both raining and not raining. Right? So Socrates is always on the lookout for this flaw of an internal inconsistency or contradiction. And then once he finds that flaw, he yanks that thread. And what I mean by that is he'll lay out his own kind of counter argument in response to this definition to try to show that the definition is so deeply flawed that it couldn't possibly be accepted by a rational person. So now watch how Socrates does this with Thrasymachus' definition. He says, okay, if, as you say, justice is nothing else than the interest of the stronger, and the stronger make the laws that serve their own interests, and the stronger sometimes screw up and err and make laws that are contrary to their own interests, and the stronger compel people to obey these laws that are erroneous, flawed laws, then that would mean that justice would be both acting for and against the interests of the stronger. Okay? Now here's what Socrates is thinking. He's saying, okay, Thrasymachus, you've said justice is nothing else but what the ruling class has decided they're going to force on people to believe or do. And they're going to force that on people because it serves the ruling class's interests. It serves their interests, not the ruled. Okay? And it's this third premise down here that might be a little unclear. So think about it this way. You would probably agree that if you were in power, you would want to make sure that the citizens that you were exerting power over weren't constantly engaged in conflict and creating chaos. You wouldn't want them creating disorder in your society. So you would probably create laws that would penalize certain types of behavior and try to keep people in control. Because after all, as a ruler, it's in your interest to have people going to work every day, doing their jobs, not thinking about overthrowing the government, and not fearing for their lives, that their neighbor's going to destroy them or take their stuff. So you create laws, you create law enforcement, and you try to create a peaceful, ordered society. Because that's in your interest as a ruler. But as you know, based on revolutions, sometimes lawmakers go too far. They impose rules that cause the people who are being ruled over to say, screw it, I can't live this way. I would rather die than live under this law. I'm going to rebel. And so you think about, like, for example, that truckers action up in Canada that happened recently, where you have these truckers saying, you've made this law that says I have to be vaccinated in order to drive my truck across state or national borders. And I don't want this. I don't want to have this health treatment. And I'm willing to sacrifice X, Y, and Z for this. And I think looking back on that, I don't think that served the Prime Minister of Canada very well to try to impose that kind of mandate when and how he did. He screwed up. As a ruler, he made a rule that caused the people he's ruling over to say, nope, not going to be part of that. So in that sense, by Thrasymachus' definition, Socrates is saying, sometimes people, when they're making rules, they make rules that are actually not good for themselves. They don't know it when they're doing it, but they make mistakes. And so your definition is so deeply flawed because if we just stop with your definition, we can see that it results in a logical contradiction right here. It leads logically to an inconsistency or a contradiction because you've got rulers that are both doing things that are against their interest and for their interest. And what Thrasymachus said is, no, justice is what's in the interests of the rulers. And so Socrates is saying, like, nope, dude, flawed. got to start over, right? So now we get back to this next step in the process where it's like, okay, Thrasymachus, take another shot at this. Back up and see if you can come up with a better definition, because the first one didn't really work. So maybe you can take parts of that first one and craft a new one. But we can't go any further in this conversation because the definition that we're working with is internally inconsistent, therefore flawed, therefore we're never going to get to a good conclusion in our argument, okay? So this is that next step in the Socratic method where we're going to, and this may go back and forth, this recursive process, right? Where we keep attempting definitions. Remember I said 90% of philosophy is coming up with good definitions. So we may do this recursive process over and over and over again where we're trying to come up with a better and better and better definition before we can move on in the conversation. And that's kind of what happens next.